Hey and welcome, this is Psychedelic Actualization. On this channel we talk about topics like self-realization, self-actualization and working with psychedelics to live a more authentic and fulfilling life. This is part 2 of my story of my spiritual emergency. Maybe we could even call it Kundalini energy awakening. We'll get into that later. Or the dark night of the soul. Sorry about the last video, it was a little bit sad, kind of, and not as upbeat and happy. Because I wanted to convey the feeling that I had, but it's very hard to tap into and convey a feeling of fear or anxiety or suffering or sadness while I'm not experiencing it. Because now I feel great. Right now in this moment I feel good. And it's very hard to convey feelings of deep sadness or fear that I went through while not being in that state. But while I was in the state, I couldn't convey it because I didn't felt like sharing anything. So this is part 2. As I said, you can watch part 1. It's linked right here. About my story of what caused the spiritual crisis that I found myself in. And we left off after 1 week. So this is week number 2 to week number 4 of the spiritual emergency, and I was completely confused. By the way, I created a workbook. I put my heart and soul into this creative expression of everything I learned in my process of going through this spiritual crisis, and I put it into the spiritual emergency workbook, a step-by-step guide on deep inner transformation, shadow experiences, and psychospiritual crisis. It's a really good book. You can download it for free. The link is in the video description and in the comment section down below. So, did I have a Kundalini energy awakening? That's a good question. So I found myself in this confused state. Week number 2. I was like, maybe it's gonna pass after a week. It didn't. The intensity did not decrease at all. I found myself still as in the state as intense as day number 1, if not even more intense. It's very hard to describe, but the feelings of it came in waves. The intensity came in waves. And while I was distracting myself with other stuff, I could of course focus more on the distraction of the mundane, of what I did. But every time I was not actively distracting myself, I found myself in the state. And even sometimes while being in the activities of distraction and of the mundane, I found myself remembering or being aware of this intense, non-ordinary state of consciousness that I found myself in. I was less afraid, I would say, because I kind of stabilized in that, and my body knew, okay, I was safe. I am not dying, maybe, because I had the constant reinforcement that life is still going on somehow, even though I am feeling afraid. Everything still seems to be going on. So I was less afraid, but still so much anxiety, so much fear. It's very hard to convey the feeling of fear and anxiety. And it brought me a lot of compassion, because I've never had states of anxiety or fear in my life. And so it was a very unfamiliar experience being in that state. But now it brought forth a deep compassion and understanding for people who are experiencing states of anxiety and fear in their day-to-day life. So blessings to everybody who's dealing with that. It's incredibly difficult. And now I can feel that. I can understand that on a deeper level, because before that I didn't have a reference point for what people were going through. I didn't have the true authentic empathy for people who are expressing or going through feelings of anxiety. So yeah, I was kind of still in the state a little bit more of allowing that which wanted to surface to unfold, trusting the process, surrendering into the state, not holding on to it. But I still wasn't fully there. I wasn't fully trusting or surrendering what was happening. I was very aware, cautious, kind of always on the lookout for something that could be happening. That's where this tension and this fear was kind of coming from. I was not fully trusting it, not fully letting go. I tried to grab onto something, hold onto something, onto a stable state of consciousness, but there was nothing really to hold on to, which was very difficult. Body-wise, I was still having intense vibrations throughout all my body. Sometimes I woke up in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., completely electrified, because at night it kind of intensified the feelings of shaking, of vibration, because then I could allow my body to relax, and then I was way more aware. Sometimes I woke up a couple times a night. I had so much energy, and energy is such a weird word, because sometimes in communications with friends or whatever, it's very difficult to convey a feeling of energy. Sometimes people would say like, yeah, energy, that's great. I mean, you always wished like you would have, you wanted a lot of energy, right? Yeah, in a certain sense, yes. Other friends were like, yeah, energy, you mean that metaphorically. You don't have a lot of energy. I'm like, no, actually, I mean that I have a lot of energy in my system, quite literally. An overabundance of energy that is pouring out of every pore of my being. Which is, sometimes it was even pleasurable. If I was in a good, peaceful state of mind, and kind of the ebbs and flows of the anxiety, and the anxiety kind of was ebbing a little bit, I could actually enjoy this feeling of the subtle vibrations going through my body and feel into that. It was not uncomfortable, but then sometimes I was remembering, oh shit, something is wrong. That's not normal. That's not usual. And then I was kind of freaking out again. Well, that was going on. It felt like I was on a moderate dose of 5-MeO-DMT. So it felt like constant, 24/7 I was tripping, basically. But without the beautiful, blissful aspect of divine unconditional love and bliss. So, and I don't know why, because sometimes I was in this open state, but it was just a lot of emotional labor. It was challenging to be tripping 24/7 without having taken any substance. Very exhausting in a sense. And yeah, still like visual distortions going on. Sometimes it was hard to read. I was extremely aware of everything going on, extremely open and sensitive emotionally, and kind of still spaced out, very hard to focus into something. Then one day I spoke to a friend of mine. I'm really blessed and so grateful to have this one friend who just deeply understands me and deeply understood also what the experience is like and what I could be going through, because he is very familiar with the concept of spiritual emergency, for example. So he was like, yeah, maybe that sounds like a Kundalini energy awakening, what you're going through. Have you looked into that? And also it sounds like a spiritual emergency, because from that point on I was not aware. I was aware of the concept of spiritual emergency. I even talked to some people about it a couple of days before the event happened. But I was like, oh yeah, I could be in one. That's right. And then I was kind of, now this journey, this quest started as gaining understanding about what was happening. And a lot was happening. So I bought recommended books, Spiritual Emergency, When Personal Transformation Becomes a Crisis, edited by Groff, and there's a lot of essays in there from Roberto Assagioli, Ram Dass, Jack Kornfield. It's a great book. And I bought Breaking Open, Finding a Way Through Spiritual Emergency, which is basically a lot of personal reports from people who were going through similar stuff. So that gave me the feeling of like, okay, I am not alone in this. This is not something that is very uncommon. And still there was this feeling, a deep feeling of loneliness. A very, very deep feeling of feeling very lonely and alone in this process. Because what I was experiencing, what my actual state of experience was like, I felt like, and which is true, right? And nobody in my immediate environment had a reference point for what I was going through. Nobody had a clue on or advice of what to do. And still there was this fear, I guess. Part of this fear is still the physical component. Did I damage my brain through a combination of substances? Did I do some harm to my body? Am I in physical danger? Because I had also throbbing vibrations in my heart or in my chest sometimes, an aching pain. And it's literally impossible to get a doc appointment for brain scans or checks very, very fast. So that's kind of still on the outlook of checking the physical side. So yeah, and then I was going through these concepts of people who have gone through similar experiences and who have mapped out some of the territories or possible perspectives and interpretations on what was happening. So the physical interpretation of is actually something wrong in the brain is one aspect and approach that I guess everybody should take when one is on the journey of figuring out what is going on with the non-ordinary state of consciousness, to kind of exclude all the physical stuff. But then the mental, psychological interpretations of labeling it as a psychosis, labeling it as whatever else could be used in psychiatry or psychology, or in the spiritual sense, labeling it as a spiritual emergency, labeling it as the dark night of the soul, could be also good to just look through every single perspective. And what resonated a lot was the concept of Kundalini energy awakening. So I did my research a little bit. I looked up all the YouTube videos and read some things about the Kundalini energy awakening. And for all of you who are interested in Kundalini, it's a very interesting term because it's such a buzzword nowadays, right? But actually, from what I understand, like I'm not an expert on the topic. I haven't done research that is very deep. So I will link to an article from Christopher Wallace or Harish in the video description, where he said that actually the term Kundalini comes from the ancient Tantric tradition, and a lot of the information about Kundalini hasn't been translated yet into Sanskrit. And a lot of what we hear about from Kundalini or Kundalini energy nowadays on YouTube or even many books are not based in the truth of the actual root of the word Kundalini. So it's a lot of modern new age interpretation that was kind of flowing into the term. And then also Yogi Bhajan, who kind of brought Kundalini yoga into the world, kind of crafted it by himself, not really basing it on ancient traditions. It's a very interesting and nuanced topic to look into, but just I just wanted to share, to be aware of that. Still, what I found in the scene, even in the new age kind of spiritual scene of Kundalini energy, resonated with me because I was experiencing similar symptoms. Kind of the symptoms of what people had described were very similar to what I was experiencing. The vibrations, the emotional turmoil, the completely existential crisis that I was going through. But still, some things were not aligning with my experience. For example, people who were talking about the kind of serpent, the coiled serpent energy going up and then through, and then all these kind of intricate details about Kundalini. Also, there seems to be a Kundalini going down and the balance of that, and this whole shebang kind of that was not part of my experience. I wasn't experiencing this clear description of the process of Kundalini energy awakening. I was having vibrations all throughout my body all the time, but still it resonated a lot, and it gave me another framework of interpretation. Another framework of interpretation that deeply resonated with me came from an essay from Roberto Assagioli, kind of the founder of Psychosynthesis, who kind of combines psychology and spirituality. And he wrote in his essay, and quoted also in his essay, a phrase from St. John of the Cross, who wrote kind of about the dark night of the soul and kind of brought that framework out into the world. And I cried when I read that, because this paragraph that I'm going to read to you resonated so deeply and so much. So first of all, Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, said, "At first, when any of them is liberated and compelled suddenly to stand up and turn his neck around and walk toward the light, he will suffer sharp pains, the glare will distress him, and he will be unable to see the realities of which, in his former state, he had seen the shadows." And then St. John used words very similar, and speaking of the experience of the dark night of the soul, and this is what deeply touched me. "The self is in the dark because it is blinded by a light greater than it can bear. As eyes weakened and clouded suffer pain when the clear light beats upon them, so the soul, by reason of its impurity, suffers exceedingly when the divine light really shines upon it. And when the rays of this pure light shine upon the soul in order to expel impurities, the soul perceives itself to be so unclean and miserable that it seems as if God had set himself against it, and itself were set against God." So I cried while I was reading this, because this is kind of what I felt deep inside while I was recalibrating back from this intense psychedelic experience, which brought me into the divine light. My ego mechanisms and this framework of holding on to a stable state of consciousness came back, but the light was still shining so strong that this sense of myself, this ego sense of my character or my personality or my soul even felt the impurities in itself, because it wasn't ready to fully accept and surrender reality as it is. And that was very difficult, but also very nice to see people have been formulating similar experiences. So yeah, I was slowly gaining an understanding of what was happening with the concepts of Kundalini energy, with the concept of the dark night of the soul, of spiritual emergency. But I was still in a state of distracting myself consciously and internally, hoping that this state would end with time. And it didn't. Like in week 2 or 3, the weeks were just passing by and it didn't increase in intensity. And I was like, what is going on? And while I was distracting myself, I was spending a lot of time with my family, infinitely grateful to have them. I was going to visit my mom's horse, or going to the beach, or playing in the sand, searching for seashells, going for a swim, all this beautiful mundane stuff. I was playing Pokemon on my old little Nintendo, so revisiting a lot of mundane stuff and living in the mundane. But still, it kind of helped in the moment to feel good, but it didn't resolve the issue of the situation. There was still something bubbling up, wanting to surface, wanting to be worked through, wanting to be understood. And I thought to myself, okay, then apparently the only way out is through. And that's what I wanted to do. And I previously, before the crisis even started, signed up for a meditation retreat, my first 10-day Vipassana retreat. But I was preparing myself for it and I was unsure, but I decided I really wanted to go and look into my state of being of this crisis. And then I got sick. I got heavy tonsillitis and heavy heavy illness. Crazy. Like, I haven't been experiencing such an illness before. I was in such a bad state of health, unimaginable. I couldn't even focus on the state of crisis because I was dealing with the state of sickness. And when you have fever, you kind of, there's this saying of a fever dream, right? And it's kind of psychedelic being sick. So while I was sick, the state of the sickness kind of merged with the state of being in this spiritual crisis and this energy awakening, and I was just confused, even more confused of what was what, but the state of the sickness was kind of overriding the state of the emergency, and that was kind of the state I was in for quite a long time. I'll share more in the next part of this story. It's been quite a bit. As I said, I want to look more into Kundalini yoga. There are about the Yoga Chudamani Upanishad, the crown jewel of yoga, and look more into the ancient roots of the word Kundalini, how it actually has been used, and not just stay on the surface level of this buzzword of interpretation, which is a lot of new agey stuff which got kind of mixed into the perception of our collective consciousness about this topic. That's about it. I was still in a state of deep suffering. I got sick, and I'll continue the story next week. I hope this was a little bit more upbeat. Still, please remain aware that I was going in this time of what I'm describing, weeks 2 to 3 and 4, I was still in a state of deep confusion, disorientation, fear and anxiety, a lot, emotional difficulty, crazy how difficult it was. Very hard to convey to somebody who's just watching, right? So, absolutely surprising, absolutely crazy how intense it was to go through this. But this was part 2 of the story. If you want to know more about the topic, spiritual emergency, psychospiritual crisis, what to do, with what mindset to go through this, you can download a free workbook that I've created about the topic. Link is in the video description and in the comment section. A full workbook about spiritual emergencies. I really liked how it turned out. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you could take some value out of this. I don't know what value anybody would take out of me sharing my story, but it's just a part of this process for me also to just share every single detail of the story, put it out there, and you can do with it whatever you want to do with it. But it's a crazy time, a crazy experience, such a novel experience for me as well, to be going through such a deep process, a deep spiritual process. It is kind of something I've always wished for, I've yearned for deep inside, right? We always wish for life-changing experience, but then when it actually turns our life upside down, we're like, whoa, careful what you ask for. Like, I didn't expect it to be that life-changing. But this experience is truly life-changing. And yeah, in the greatest sense, it can be seen as a blessing and as an opportunity, even though in the experience it might, and it did for me, feel like the greatest curse, as we said, as if God himself had set himself against me. Wow, absolutely crazy. That's it for today. Thank you so much, all the love, and I'll see you next week. Bless.